Alright, welcome back. So in the last video, we talked about all the different data types in C# as well as we went through some simple if statements and loops. In this video we're gonna create a simple calculator program using all of the stuff that we learned in the previous video. So to start off, what we need to do is we need to start off with a blank solution. So right now we're using the same main function as we made in the first video. So what we need to do is we want to make a calculator app that when we give it two numbers, it'll either add, subtract, multiply, or divide. And we want it to do it so that it keeps going until we tell it to stop. So that is going to require a do-while loop. So let's start off with creating that. So do, and then at the end while. So we first need to create something that we can put in this while part. So what we'll do first is we'll make it a string, and then we'll call it continue calculations. Alright. So first, what we want to do is we want it to display something to begin with so the user knows what to do. So to do that, we will do console.writeLine, and then we'll say please enter your calculation, and then to make it easy we'll give the user some options. So we'll do A for add, S for subtract, N for multiply, and D for divide. That way the user knows what her app is able to do. So now what we need to do is we need to find a way so that the user can input something. So for user input, what we'll do is create a variable, and we'll call this one calculation, and we'll set it equal to readLine. So what that is saying is after this is printed, then the program is going to expect the user to input something. That's what this read line is. And so whatever the user types in will be stored into this calculation variable, and it's a string. So after that, what do we want to do once we know they want to add, for example? Then we should probably ask what numbers they want to add. So we'll do another WriteLine. We'll say please input your first number, and then the same thing. So once we need a way to store the user's input, so we'll do var, and then we'll just call it num1 equals console.readLine. So now once we know that, we need the second number, so the same thing. Please input your second number. And then we'll call this one num2. Alright, so now we know what the user wants to do. So if they want to add, we have that right there. And we have their two numbers. So from there, we want to actually use those two numbers to do whatever calculation they want. So what we could do is we could make a bunch of if statements to say if calculation is add, then do this. Else, if calculation is subtract, then subtract them. Or what we could do is we could create separate functions for each to make it easier to read. So that way we can say if calculation is A, and then so let's create the add function. So we need to go out. We need to create another public static int. So we want to return an int, and then we'll call it add. We'll just call it add numbers. So what we want to do is we need two ints to add. Alright. And then to make this easy, we'll just return the two numbers added together. So from here, all we need to do is just call add numbers. And so since these two numbers are strings, to make them ints, what we could do is do int.parse num1 and then int.parse num2. So this int.parse, what it does is it looks at this string and then it pulls out the number from the string. So now if the calculation from the input is A, then it'll call this add numbers function. So we also need a way to store that number because it's returning those two numbers added together. So we'll create another variable and we can just call it total. So now this total is the total from this add numbers. So now that we have the actual answer, what we want to do is we want to print out to the screen so the user knows what the answer is. So to do that, we just need to make another variable. Oh, not a variable, we just need to print writeline and then total. So since Oh, first what we need to do is we need to put this total, we need to define it outside of this if statement. So let's do that up here. Needs to be defined outside of the if statement, because if that if statement isn't true, then it's not going to go inside there. So, and then we also need to, we'll just set that equal to 0. It needs to be some number in order for us to use it. So now what should happen is we have the total, and then it should be printed to the screen so the user know what it is. So then, once we have the number, we also want the calculator to continue asking for calculation, because what if the user wants to calculate some numbers again? So then we need to print out again, would you like to make another calculation? And then again we'll give them some options. And then what we'll do is we'll set this continue calculation to their input. So that way what we can do is, while continue calculation, this needs to be set to continue calculation. Well, continue calculation does not equal no. And so what that is saying is this is going to keep looping while this does not equal n. So if the user inputs a y, that means they want to make another calculation. So y doesn't equal n, so it'll go back to the beginning of this do part of the do while loop. So now this should be ready to run. So to run it, we just hit this play button right here and let it build. Alright, so you should see it running, so it says please enter your calculation. So since we are only created a function for add, we'll just do add, and then we'll do 5 for our first number, then say 3. So you can see right there it shows an 8, and then it asks us again, would you like to make another calculation? And we'll hit N. So you can see when you hit N, it exits. So something that I noticed is we're just printing out the number, which is fine, but it's not very easy to read. So what we can do is we can print out the answer is, so we can either do something like this where we first put the answer is, and then a space, and then plus, and then the total. Something that I like to do, just because I think it's more readable, is if you put a $sign in front of a string, then what that is telling the compiler is there is going to be something in that string that's a variable. So with that $sign, what you can do is put the curly brackets in there and put total. So then the answer is, and then the total will display right there. So either way will work. I just like this way because I think it's easier to read, but if you like doing the plus, then that works too. So this only works for add numbers right now. So if you want to, you can do the same thing for subtract, multiply, and divide, and it'll just be the same thing, but you would do else if calculation is S for subtraction. I won't do all of them right now, but that's how you do it. And then you would have to just make an subtract numbers and then return num1 minus num2. So something else I wanted to show is, this is all pretty easy, but let's say you wanted to have two separate add numbers functions. Let's say you wanted one that took in 2 ints and another one that took in 2 doubles. If I ran this right now and I gave it like 5.1 and 3.8, those are doubles, so this add numbers wouldn't know what to do with that, and it would break. So you could add another add numbers and then just put double, but what I wanted to show is how you would get to functions that are in a separate class. So right now we're in the C# tutorial class. So let's make an add class that will store this add numbers function as well as another one. So you can either create a separate file for this, or you can just add another class in the same file. So what I'm going to do is I need to go outside of the class that we're in and say public class, and then I'll just call it add. So that created our class for us. And then what we need to do is we need to create a constructor for it. So to create a constructor in C#, all you do is do public or private and then the name of the class with the curly brackets. So that way we can create an object that is this add class. So then from here, all we would need to do is, let's move this into here. So now we have this add class, we have the constructor, and we have this the same add numbers. So Visual Studios is going to get mad at us because it doesn't know where this add numbers method is. So we need to create an object for this add class. So let's do that right at the beginning, the main functions. So to create an object, all we have to do is first put the name of the class that it's in and give it a name. So we'll just say add equals new add. What you could also do is, instead of putting an add at the beginning, you could put var and C#. You can also do no add right there with just the parentheses, but we'll keep it like that. So let's say, for example, you wanted to pass in the two numbers into the whole class. Then in this constructor, you would need to put in these parentheses 2 ints like you did in the function, and then set those two numbers to class level variables, and then this add numbers could use those numbers. But we'll keep it simple and not have any, we won't pass in anything into the constructor. So then, now that we have this, all we have to do is do this add dot and add numbers. Let's see. There we go. So if this function was static like it was, then all we would need to do is, instead of creating that object, we would just put the name of the class. So add, but with a capital. If it's static, that means that it doesn't need any of the class level variables. So we'll just take away the static. So now there's no error right there, and it should run just the same. So let's run it just to make sure it's running fine. Add and 3. So it shows the answer is 8, and then would you like to make another calculation and just exit. So you can see it's doing the same thing. It's working the exact same. So let's create another add numbers function to demonstrate that you can use two different functions in this class. So we can call it the same thing as the other one as long as the return type is different. So in this one we're returning a double, which is different from an int. So right now this is calling the add numbers that take in an int. You can see right here, Visual Studios will tell you that there's another function that's overloaded. So if we wanted to use that function with the double that takes in the double. We'll just change these, and we'll have to change this total to a double. So now the total is a double, and same thing with the int.parse. This is just double.parse, so it'll look at the string and pull out the double and pass it into the add numbers. So we'll do A, and let's do 2.5 and 2.5. That shows the answer is 5. So we know it works. And we know that these doubles are passed into the correct function. So if to make things more modular and make things more readable, you can create a separate class for adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing. This example is really simple, so you probably wouldn't want to do that in real life, but this is just for learning. Something you can also do is maybe you want to create a list and pass it in a list of ints, and you want to add all of those. What you could do is list of ints, and then just call it ints. So what you would want to do in that case, if you have this list of ints, you would want to loop through each one, and you can add it to a total and then return the total. So let's just do int total, just set it equal to 0 for now, and let's use a for each loop. So for each var, and then we'll just call it number and ints, so that's saying for each entry in the list, what we want to do is set the total to the number. So this plus equals is saying, let's say the total is 0 right now, let's say the first number is 1, so add 1 to 0, so now it's 1. So now let's say the next number is 2, so the total is 1 still, and the number is 2, so let's add 2 to that 1. So it's not setting total to number every single time and overriding it, it's just adding to whatever total is. And then you would return total. So we would have to change our input somehow to be able to ask for a list of numbers to pass in. So you would have to change your input and create a variable for that. But this is just an easy way to create a calculator. And we were able to show you how to make a separate class with a constructor and functions, different functions that you can use in that class. So if you wanted to continue this, all you would need to do is create a separate class for subtract, one for multiply, and one for divide. And you can also change the output to however you want. You can square root stuff, you can create whatever you want for this calculator. So thanks for watching.